All right, welcome to Life's Not Linear. Thank you for being our guest today. I think you are guest 48. So
There
I'm
we
super
go. Making
excited.
fast progress.
Yeah. So thank you, Kyle. If you would like to just take a minute to introduce yourself and then maybe start from what you went to college for, where you went to college, and kind of how that transition after went.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. Currently, my position, I work for Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm working on various number of innovation initiatives that the university is pursuing. And the one that I'm really in charge of kind of fully is the Innovators On Tap podcast, which is hosted by Marquette's innovator in residence. His name is Chuck Svoboda. He was a former chairman and CEO of a company called Cree for 16 years, and they were really critical in leading the LED lighting revolution. So his company actually created the first commercially successful LED light bulb. So he has a really interesting perspective on innovation. So it's really giving him a platform to connect with other innovators and entrepreneurs, inspire the next generation of innovators and leaders. So that's what I'm working on. How I got there is probably the exact opposite path that you would anticipate, which I think fits well with the theme of the show. So I didn't go to college for business, innovation, entrepreneurship, none of that. I graduated in 2015 from University of Minnesota with a degree in political science and philosophy. And so it was really a lot of writing. And I was really interested in like social justice and seeing politics as an avenue to pursue that. I worked like in my sophomore year, I worked for the Obama campaign. I really saw myself going into politics or like advocacy, maybe moving to DC, what have you. And then from there, things just kind of took on their own path. So a quick rundown. After college, I did Americorp for 2 years. So that's what brought me to Milwaukee. I was a Americorp member with College Possible, which is a nonprofit that helps first generation low income students get to and through college. So connected to kind of, I guess, the goals and ambitions of real industry in a way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I worked with 40 juniors and then 40 seniors, and now they're going into their senior year for those that did pursue a 4-year degree. After that, I took on a fellowship at Marquette, also focused on economic and social justice. And that's called the Trinity Fellowship. And there I got my master's in political science. I worked for the Housing Authority for the city of Milwaukee, working on West Lawn Gardens, which is this really cool, innovative new public housing project in Milwaukee. And then I also co-founded the Bridge to City podcast, which is a local podcast here in Milwaukee that's still going on. That's really about civic engagement, inspiring people to action. We interview everyone from, elected officials to nonprofit leaders to community activists. And it's all about, hey, if you watch CNN and you're like, holy shit, our world sucks, I can't do anything, I can't make any changes. Well, here's a platform that's focused on local level. It tells you how you can actually make change in your community. It's really focused on like small steps and building that community to get more involved. And it's much more, I think, optimistic and uplifting than the national news, unfortunately. So that's kind of like a broad career trajectory, and that's what led me to my position now at Marquette.
Nice. When did you make the move from Minnesota to Milwaukee? Like, how'd you get here?
Yeah, so I graduated again in 2015, and I really wanted to do some sort of service. So I was looking at the Peace Corp, and I was on the wait list to go to Cameroon to be a Peace Corp member. And then I was at this party, and my friend was grading ACT papers, as you do at a party.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's going on here? And she's like, she had graduated and I was a senior. She was like, I'm part of College Possible. It's an Americorp program, and I'm working with students, and they did their practice ACT test, so I have to grade them. I was like, oh, that's cool. I've never heard of Americorp. Is that like the Peace Corps? And essentially it is, but domestically is how I'd compare the two. And so I applied to that specific nonprofit that uses Americorp members, College Possible. Got into it, and since that was a for sure deal and I was still waiting on Peace Corps, I decided to do Americorp. It still fit this service oriented kind of mission that I wanted. and I got selected to go to Milwaukee. There was
Oh,
like
nice.
eight, 9 sites that you could go to. Milwaukee was the one that like picked me,
Mhm.
and I'd never been here before, and I was like, let's do it. So I moved here and have been here ever since.
Mhm. How has your impression of Milwaukee been, being like the most segregated city?
Yeah, I think to me, Milwaukee is a microcosm of a lot of the issues that plague the entire country
Mhm.
and even the world. I think, you know, we have a history of deindustrialization that's really hurts job prospects in the Midwest. We obviously have a history of segregation, of racism, which, you know, has been the story of America since day one. And so I think in some ways, like you get a lot of the problems that are all across the country, you're exposed to them in Milwaukee,
Mhm.
which I think is both a bad thing that those problems exist, but it's also a good thing that you're exposed to them, and two, that, you know, you can make change in your own community. And that, I think that's where it has to start. So my impression of Milwaukee is it has some great things. It has some not so great things, but like
Mhm.
any city, um, you have to fight for making it better every day.
What drew you to social justice, and like what made you want to go into like service, and kind of like what's driving that? So I feel like
Yeah.
especially a lot of kids like out of college are like, okay, how can I make the most money? How can I pay off my
Yeah.
student loans? So it's
Right.
how do you like take that risk and be okay with that?
Yeah. So in some ways, I think this is kind of the irony of going into like social justice
Mhm.
or like Americorp or the Peace Corps is if you look at the breakdown, it's a lot of privileged kids because, like myself included, I didn't have to worry about any money. I
Mhm.
graduated debt free. I had family support. So it was like, I don't need to go make money.
Mhm.
I'm aware of my privilege. Like, what can I do with that privilege to try to make the world more equitable?
Mhm.
And so it really was just like an awareness of that privilege and wanting to give back. But I'm fully aware that people have really good intentions and can want to make their community better, but they might be strapped with debt and they have to take a job that they don't love because like paying the bills is a real thing.
Mhm.
So I think honestly, finding ways to make service like a more a better or like more accessible option for everyone would be
Mhm.
awesome. I think like the idea of getting into service was just growing up in a very privileged area. And in high school, I got into it. I had a great politics teacher. I was president of Amnesty International, so I always like had a global outlook. And I remember there was one class that we had to like apply to get into,
Mhm.
and one year they were going to like take away that application process and open it up for anyone. It was like an advanced class, history and English combines.
Mhm.
And I remember like people getting so upset that like anyone could take it if they wanted to challenge themselves, and like, oh, it's going to, you know, make the curriculum worse and the class won't be as smart and all, you know, all this nonsense that I think reflecting back on it was just, it was coded racism.
Yeah.
And so I remember being like, why, like, isn't this what this country is supposed to be about? That anyone wants to like challenge themselves and be better, like we give them that opportunity and we help them succeed. And, you know, why are you so protective of this class? And that was just a really small thing that always stuck out to me. And I think
Mhm.
planted in the seeds that like, you know, opportunity is not there for everyone. It's not equitable for everyone. And, you know, use your privilege for good to expand opportunity for all.
That's awesome. Oh, where did you grow up?
It's a city called Eden Prairie, Minnesota. So it's a
Oh, okay.
suburb of Minneapolis, like 60,000 people.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah. So my high school class was like 850
that's
students.
a big
And I
class.
think the whole school was like 3,500. So our high school is huge. Like it's
Mhm.
probably the size of some small colleges.
Yeah, it's as big as MSOE, so
Right.
yeah. That's great that you were able to be aware of like the power and the privilege that you had at such a young age. I don't know if a lot of, I think more now that social media is like getting bigger, people are able to like educate themselves in different ways, but definitely looking back to, or just looking at high schoolers now or when I was a high schooler, it's like I feel like I was just brain dead. Like I didn't even look at these things really, or maybe they were like microaggressions that I realized now that I look back, I'm like, oh shit, like that was racist, but
Right.
it's like not
Yeah.
something
And
that's
I,
talked about.
right. And I certainly don't want to give the impression that I was perfect. And
Mhm.
I think if you grow up in America in, American culture, like it's a racist culture, and
Mhm.
you learn a lot of things that you have to actively unlearn your whole life. But and again, like I was very fortunate to have parents that were pretty tuned into social justice, and that's really why I cared, is because they taught me from a young age that I should. So
Mhm.
it wasn't really me. It was my parents telling me, hey, this is important. And then I was like, okay, I'm brainwashed. It's important. And it just so happens that they were probably right.
That's awesome. Um, so now could you speak a bit more to your role with like Innovators on Tap and Bridge the City, and a little bit about how you went from like political science to, podcasting, and how that's like opened doors for you?
Yeah. So I'll start with a very broad take on it, and this is just like general career advice for anyone listening.
Mhm.
Um, I think that I'm not a big believer in career plans. And I think I just read this book, Range, by David Epstein,
Mhm.
which everyone should check out, particularly if you've always self-identified as like a generalist and you feel like everyone else is a specialist. Like this book will
Yes.
will will speak to you, and it will really give you a new framework, a new understanding of your own self, but also a confidence that this is an okay path to take. But so why I don't believe in career plans is I think a lot of people, and I was taught this in a lot of ways, say, what job do you want, and here's the steps you have to take to get there. And I think the problem with that is the job you want now is not the job you're going to want probably from in 5 to 10 years. And so I think when we make a career plan and we pick, like, I want to be a lawyer, what happens to most people in my experience is you have to start thinking about being a lawyer, in ninth grade almost. Like, it's particularly once you get to your freshman year of college, like you have to think about your major. You have to start taking the LSAT. You have to apply to law schools. You have to go to law school. Who you were your freshman year of college, I hope, is radically different than who you are 7 or 8 years after. And so what I think ends up happening is people focus so much on this goal and they put their head down and they pursue it. And when they put their head back up, they realize, I don't even want to be a lawyer. I'm a radically different person than I thought I was. And like now I feel like I wasted all of this time. And so I would say, instead of making a career plan, focus on what you want to do right now and
Mhm.
do that to the best of your ability, and that's going to open up a lot of opportunities. And then when those opportunities arise, ask yourself, is this the new journey I want to take?
Mhm.
And while you're doing all this and being exposed to all these new opportunities, that's how you actually discover who you are and what you want to do. Is not through theoretically thinking about what you like. It's about actually doing it and getting that real feedback, and then deciding, okay, I do like to do this because I've done it, or I
Mhm.
don't like to do it because I've done it. So that's kind of been my journey. And one of the beautiful things about starting Bridge the City and working for the Housing Authority, and I was also working remotely for this company in Chicago that was doing like civic tech, was I was just exposing myself to all of the different options. So with Bridge the City, like, we were interviewing a lot of people. I learned about, what it's like to be in local politics, what it's like to work at a local nonprofit, what it's like to work in the innovation or entrepreneurial space. Do I like editing audio? Do I like doing the social media? Do I like creating content? And so I think my time at Marquette was really 2 years of getting exposed to so many different potential careers, so many different ideas, meeting so many different people, that when I came out of it, what I wanted to do was radically different than what I thought I wanted to do going into the program.
Mhm.
And so with all that experience and exposure to different things, how I got my current role was Chuck had just retired. He was coming back to Marquette. He was going to be the innovator in residence, and he wanted to do a podcast.
Mhm.
And he told people at Marquette this, and they were like, "Oh, we have a student that runs his own podcast called Bridge the City. You should just meet with him, and he'll answer your questions."
Mhm.
So he just shot me an email saying, "Hey, will you come talk to me about podcasting?" So I met him at
Mhm.
Collectivo. And he just asked a bunch of questions. I answered them, and it turns out that it kind of like turned into a role through dialogue and discussion. And I think that's the other thing is like sometimes the best roles are the ones that didn't exist before, that are really carved out and catered to your specific skill set. And I think you open the chances of you getting that role up exponentially if you do have like a really diverse range of skills and have been exposed to a lot of things. Because I like to think of myself as like maybe a Swiss Army knife. Like I'm capable of doing a lot pretty good. And so, and a few things really good that get me in the door, but having that Swiss Army skill set, I think is really important.
That I agree with you with the like. I hope that you're not the same person you were when you were a freshman. I hope that you've had like a lot of experiences that give you more perspective. I like that you said like you don't really believe in career plans, because honestly I don't think so either, because it's like by the time you plan out something, things change. Like your 5-year
Right.
plan is going to change in like 5 months. So it's
Right.
like, you know, you can think like a few months ahead, like obviously you got to pay the bills, like you have goals, but it's like how you get there is not linear. It could be through a conversation, it could be through LinkedIn. It looks
Right.
like anything.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just going off that, like the no career plan. So there's this really cool thing called the end of history illusion, which I learned about in range. And it's basically
Okay.
like what we're talking about. If you look back 5 years, you'll notice how much you've grown.
Crazy.
But if you project forward 5 years, you think you'll stay the same. But we know that's not true, because if you look back 5 years, again, like you have changed so much. And so the thing I don't like about career plans, it doesn't mean don't be intentional. Be intentional about what you're working on. Do it to the best of your ability. Think through and reflect on if you like it or if you don't. But I think when people have these really like intense career plans, odds are your career is going to be different than what you're planning, and you just beat yourself up about it. So you're really setting yourself up to like be really negative on yourself, to feel like a failure. And I think the beauty of life is like no plan is, you know, life's
Freedom.
not linear
Yeah.
essentially. And so if you go in with this idea it will be, you're going to be let down. If you embrace that life isn't linear and truly embrace that and just love every detour you take, you're going to be happier, you're going to be healthier, and you're going to be more successful.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's definitely part of me like sophomore year of college where I was still in that mindset of like, oh, like I need to be graduating in 4 years and I need to do this and I'm going to get my MBA. And then once I let go of those expectations, my life skyrocketed into so many cooler things. Like, because you look, it's like tunnel vision. And then when you take that away, you see opportunities that you didn't see before and you say yes to more things. And like, whether it's a part of your degree or not, like it's going to add value to you. So I agree. So I'm curious to hear, you said how, I think it was like going into the Trinity Fellows program, you had a different expectation of, or what you want to do versus like when you came out of it. Could you maybe talk about that? Like how that shifted through your experiences?
Yeah, definitely. So I went in with a really strong predisposition to go into like public policy, and work in the political space. I just thought that is where, and I still do, where a lot of power resides and how you can make a lot of positive change. So that's, I got my master's in political science. But really I would credit like Bridge the City for just exposing me to like a lot of different things in the city. I would say I got equally just as much of an education of how cities work by the podcast than from like the political science program. And so like really learning how cities work, I think I honestly, I came in to Trinity Fellows and probably life in general with a very anti-business disposition. I felt like business was like the antithesis of social justice. If you
That's
go into
where I'm at
business,
now.
right, you only care about money and like, and those are my biases. But honestly, like I don't believe that anymore. And I think I look at it in terms of power and just how the political space has bad actors, the business space has bad actors, but just how the political space has, you know, good actors and heroes and people that do fight for what's right. The business space has that as well. And so I would say that don't allow your like individual morality to dictate what profession you go into. I mean, I wouldn't work on like an oil rig probably, but like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like, don't go into business because you're like, I want to be a good person. I think that's honestly holding us back because
Mhm.
business plays such an important role in society that we need people that really are dedicated to social justice, going into companies, leading those companies, changing them from the inside. I don't think, necessarily a business is going to listen to your tweet at them that they should do something better. I think a more effective way is like, take over the ship, turn it into a
Mhm.
pirate ship, go into that company and change it from the inside. I think there's a lot of difficulties with doing that. And I know people have tried and get burnt out and there's a lot of resistance, but I would just say that I've come to realize that you can make change through any industry, nonprofit, for profit, you name it. And you can make a positive impact no matter what role you're in.
That's a good perspective. Yeah, it's definitely easy to get tunnel vision on like, putting like stereotyping, putting things in the categories. I definitely am like, I never want to go into sales. Like salespeople are snakes. Like even though like everything is
Right.
sales. So, but
Right. And I think, to that point, which is a great point, like I think if you're lying and selling something you don't believe in, I
mhm,
mean, maybe there's some, depending on what it is, maybe there's an issue, but like to me, sales is like, it's persuasion. It's
yeah,
saying, here is my point of view. Here's how I think the world should work. And I'm going to, fight to make that a reality and sell you on that idea. I think like
mhm,
when you're talking to someone about why Black Lives Matter is like important and
yeah,
it's, all lives matter. And again, my opinion, like that doesn't make any sense. That's sales. Like you have to lay out an argument of like what Black Lives Matter actually means, why it's important to support it, why all lives matter might just be, coded racism. And like that is sales to me. So
mhm,
believing in what you're selling is really important, but the actual selling of it doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
mhm, yeah. Thank you for sharing like your perspectives and your experiences. I feel like this is what I would want to hear if I'm like a young college student, and this really helped. So I appreciate your time today and sharing all of that.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. And I love the idea that life's not linear. I couldn't agree more. So it's a cool show.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.